Welcome to Outside Views. Today we continue our series Briturn, the Obstacles, and this is Chapter 14, Transport Policy. As we examine the possibility of the UK joining the European Union again, it's essential to remember that this would not be a simple reversal of Brexit. The UK would need to apply as a new candidate and undergo the rigorous EU accession process, adhering to all the requirements for membership. And today's focus is on Chapter 14 of the Acquis Communautaire, and that is transport policy. The EU's transport policy is designed to create a safe, efficient and environmentally sustainable system that ensures free movement of goods and people across borders. And this involves 6 key sectors: road transport, railways, inland waterways, combined transport, aviation and maritime transport. Each of these sectors is subject to EU regulations that set technical and safety standards, market liberalization rules and environmental policies. For the UK, aligning with these rules again would require significant adjustments in policy, infrastructure investments and regulatory oversight. Before Brexit, the UK was deeply integrated into the EU's transport network, benefiting from harmonized regulations, funding for infrastructure projects, and seamless cross-border connectivity. Since leaving, the UK has faced numerous challenges, including increased border checks, disrupted supply chains, and the loss of mutual recognition agreements for professional transport qualifications. Rejoining the EU would require the UK to reintegrate into this framework, restoring its access to the benefits of the single transport market, while also committing to EU-wide transport policies and standards. Road transport is one of the most critical areas of the EU's transport policy. EU rules regulate everything from vehicle emissions and road safety standards to working hours for drivers and market competition. The UK has maintained many of these standards post-Brexit, but there are areas where divergence has occurred. For example, UK hauliers now face additional customs procedures, cabotage restrictions, and limits on their ability to operate freely within the EU. Joining the EU again would mean the UK regaining full access to the European road transport market, but it would also require compliance with EU rules on emissions, safety regulations, and working conditions for drivers. Railways represents another crucial sector. The EU has a comprehensive strategy to create a single European railway market, promoting competition and interoperability between national rail networks. The UK, while previously a key player in the system, has seen reduced cooperation with European rail operators since Brexit. One major challenge in this sector is the Channel Tunnel, which requires regulatory alignment between the UK and EU for continued operations. Joining the EU again would mean the UK adopting EU railway regulations, ensuring compatibility with the broader European rail network, and potentially gaining access to EU funding for railway infrastructure. Inland waterways and combined transport are smaller but still relevant sectors. The EU promotes the use of inland waterways to reduce road congestion and lower emissions. For the UK, joining the EU again would mean aligning with the European regulatory framework for inland waterway transport and benefiting from EU-supported initiatives aimed at promoting sustainable transport solutions. Combined transport, which integrates different modes of transportation, would also see improved coordination between UK and EU logistics networks, reducing inefficiencies caused by border delays and regulatory barriers. Aviation is one of the most heavily impacted sectors post-Brexit. Previously, UK airlines operated freely within the EU under the Open Skies Agreement. Since Brexit, UK carriers have faced restrictions on their ability to operate intra-EU flights, and British aviation professionals have lost automatic recognition of their qualifications. Joining the EU again would restore full participation in the European Common Aviation Area, or ECAA, allowing UK airlines unrestricted access to EU markets. However, this would require the UK to comply with EU aviation safety and environmental regulations, as well as state aid rules governing airline subsidies. And maritime transport is another sector requiring alignment. The EU sets strict safety, environmental and competition rules for the maritime industry. Post-Brexit, UK ports and shipping companies have had to adapt to new customs procedures and regulatory divergence from the EU. Joining the EU again would mean full compliance with the EU's maritime safety framework, but also participating in the European Maritime Safety Agency and access to EU funding for port development projects. It would also restore simplified trade routes between the UK and continental Europe, reducing delays and costs associated with customs checks and regulatory differences. A critical aspect of the EU's transport policy is its commitment to sustainability. The European Green Deal includes ambitious targets to reduce emissions for the transport sector, but also promote electrification and invest in sustainable mobility. Joining the EU again would require the UK to align with these objectives, potentially impacting policies on fuel taxation, vehicle emission standards, and investment in public transportation. While the UK has set its own environmental goals post-Brexit, reintegration into the EU would necessitate adopting the bloc's broader sustainability framework. From a regulatory perspective, joining the EU again would require the UK to re-establish its participation in EU transport agencies and networks. And this includes the European Aviation Safety Agency, the EASA, the European Railway Agency, the ERA, and the European Maritime Safety Agency, the EMSA. These organizations set technical standards, ensure regulatory compliance, and promote best practices across member states. The UK would need to commit to full cooperation with these bodies, aligning its domestic legislation with EU transport laws and reintroducing mechanisms for compliance, monitoring, and enforcement. But how difficult would it be for the UK to complete this chapter? From a technical standpoint, much of the UK's transport infrastructure and regulatory framework remains closely aligned with EU standards. However, political challenges could arise, particularly regarding sovereignty concerns and regulatory oversight. Some sectors, such as aviation and road transport, may see industry resistance to re-adopting EU regulations. On the other hand, businesses that rely on seamless cross-border transport, such as logistics companies and airlines, would likely welcome the return of EU membership benefits. A major advantage of joining the EU's transport system again would be the restoration of market access and regulatory certainty. Since Brexit, UK businesses have faced logistical bottlenecks, additional paperwork, and delays that have impacted supply chains and increased costs. Reintegration into the EU transport framework would remove these barriers, facilitating smoother trade and travel between the UK and EU member states. Additionally, the UK would regain access to EU transport funding programs, supporting infrastructure projects and modernization efforts. However, there are potential downsides. The UK would need to accept EU transport policies without opt-outs, meaning that any future regulatory changes at the EU level would directly impact UK transport industries, although once again they would have a word in them. Additionally, some areas of divergence post-Brexit may need to be reversed, requiring amendments to domestic laws and policies. So in conclusion, Chapter 14, Transport Policy, highlights both the opportunities and obstacles of a potential Briturn. While reintegration into the EU transport system would provide significant economic and logistical benefits, it would also require substantial policy adjustments and political negotiations. For the UK, this chapter is not just about technical compliance. It's about ensuring a well-functioning, competitive, and sustainable transport sector that aligns with European standards and objectives. So thank you for joining me on this 14th step in our exploration of the obstacles to Briturn. And if you found this analysis insightful, please like the video, share it, and subscribe to Outside Views for more in-depth discussions on the policies in our post-Brexit world. And let's continue the conversation in the comments below the video. What do you think about the UK's ability to align with the EU's transport policies? I look forward to your thoughts, and as always, stay informed and see you in the next video. The next one is right here in the end screen.